defense wall that believed even the world's best intelligence agency, Mossad, and the invincible Air Force could not be destroyed. Yet within just a few hours on October 6, 1973, Israel reached a situation where the country was on the verge of being wiped off the face of the earth. On a holy day when the entire nation was immersed in prayer, the sirens of death wailed simultaneously from two borders. Those were the moments when even Israel's defense minister had to admit that the fall of the third Jerusalem temple was near. How Israel stunned the world by making a comeback from the pit of defeat. In 2026, West Asia is once again in the grip of an unprecedented war. Direct military clashes between Israel and Iran have kept the world on edge. Even with cutting-edge artificial intelligence technologies and satellite surveillance, the unpredictability of military maneuvers continues to shock the world. To fully understand these complex modern wars and the shockwaves they create, we need to go back more than half a century, to a time when a major military power was literally blinded by its own overconfidence. That was October of 1973. After the Six-Day War of 1967, the belief that Israel was an invincible force having crushed the Arab army took root all over the world. Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, Jordan's West Bank, and Syria's Golan Heights all came under Israel's complete control. At that time, Israel's military intelligence division, Amman, was filled with absolute confidence. Historians refer to their belief that the Arab countries would never dare to start another war as the concept. They were firmly convinced that Egypt would not launch an attack without acquiring fighter jets capable of defeating the Israeli Air Force. But across the border, the story was entirely different. Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and Syrian President Hafez al-Assad were secretly planning massive operations to reclaim their lost land and pride. Using state-of-the-art surface-to-air missiles received from the Soviet Union, they created a new defensive shield. Without Israel noticing, Egypt and Syria managed to move tens of thousands of soldiers to the border. They disguised this military deployment as training exercises. October 6, 1973. It was Yom Kippur, the holiest day for Jews. On this day of atonement, the entire country was engaged in prayer and fasting. Almost all communication systems, including radio and television, were silent. Because of the holy day, the vast majority of soldiers had not reported for duty. Then, exactly at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, that silence was shattered across the country by the sound of warning sirens. Israeli intelligence was caught completely off guard as, at the very same time, Egypt in the south, in Sinai, and in the north, Syria unleashed a devastating attack against Israel on the Golan Heights. The Egyptian army began their attack under the name Operation Badr. The Bar Lev Line, a defense built by Israel parallel to the Suez Canal using concrete and sand, was considered one of the most secure borders in the world. However, using powerful high-pressure water cannons, Egyptian engineers created large breaches in those sand embankments within a matter of hours. Tens of thousands of Egyptian soldiers stormed into Sinai through those breaches. Even though Israel sent its air force, which was considered its greatest strength, into the battlefield, Israeli fighter jets were literally burned to ashes in front of the Soviet-made SAM missiles. In the first few days itself, Israel lost dozens of warplanes. The situation in Sinai was dire. In the north, the situation in the Golan Heights was even more terrifying. To face more than 1,400 Syrian tanks and a massive infantry force, Israel had only 177 tanks at its disposal. Even though they were vastly outnumbered, the Israeli soldiers fought bravely. Many tank commanders sacrificed their own lives to stop the Syrian advance in the Golan. Those were hours when the very survival of Israel was in question. At that time, seeing the fall of the nation looming ahead, Defense Minister Moshe Dayan told Prime Minister Golda Meir that the fall of the Third Jerusalem Temple was near. Israel's weapons stockpile was depleting rapidly. With no other option left, Prime Minister Golda Meir urgently requested help from America. Against the backdrop of the Cold War, the thought of Soviet-backed Arab nations winning was simply unimaginable for America. President Richard Nixon launched one of the largest airlift missions in history, called Operation Nickelgrass. A massive stockpile of weapons, tanks, and fighter jets was sent. Within days, these supplies were flown to Israel, while on the other side, the Soviet Union was also providing large quantities of weapons to the Allied countries. Those were moments when the world stood on the brink of a third world war. With the arrival of new weapons and reserve soldiers, the course of the war began to change. By mid-October, the Israeli army had gathered all its strength. In the north, not only did they drive the Syrian army out from the Golan Heights, but also advanced to within 40 kilometers of the Syrian capital, Damascus. In the south, under the leadership of General Ariel Sharon, the Israeli army made a daring move. Identifying the gaps in the Egyptian army, the Israeli forces crossed the Suez Canal and entered Egyptian soil itself. They completely surrounded the entire Egyptian Third Army. The highway to Cairo city came under Israeli control. Israel's struggle for survival ultimately turned into a complete victory on enemy soil. Due to the pressure from both America and the Soviet Union, a ceasefire came into effect on 25th October 1973. Even though Israel achieved a major military victory, the impact of the war was immense. More than 2,600 Israeli soldiers and tens of thousands of Arab soldiers lost their lives. The Israeli confidence that they were invincible was shattered forever. That shock created major tremors in Israeli politics. Prime Minister Golda Meir was ousted from power. However, this war fundamentally altered the political equations in the Middle East. The realization dawned that peace could be achieved not through war but only through negotiations. It led to the historic Israel-Egypt peace agreement of 1979. As we stand in the year 2026, even though cutting-edge technologies have been deployed on the Middle Eastern battlefield, the present conflicts between Israel and Iran remind us of that old lesson from 6 decades ago. The story of Israel's survival, leaping from the brink of defeat to victory. No matter how powerful intelligence systems may be, human judgments can still go wrong. The Yom Kippur War of 1973 taught the world a very simple truth. Real security and defense do not lie in weapons, but rather in sustained efforts for lasting peace. In war, no one is completely invincible, yaar.